There's a moment in the season 1 finale of Rick and Morty that most people remember as a punchline. Rick Sanchez, the smartest man in the universe, portal gun-carrying nihilist, has spent the entire season shouting his catchphrase. Yeah! The line has been printed on t-shirts, memed into oblivion, turned into shorthand for the show's whole cool detachment, the audio cue that lets you know a joke has landed. And then, in a quiet exchange in the middle of a house party, Rick's oldest and only real friend, an alien named Bird Person, turns to Morty and translates the phrase for him. In his native tongue, wooba lubba dub dub means, I am in great pain, please help me. Watch that reveal again. Because what a fandom took as nonsense gibberish was a distress signal, hidden in plain sight, delivered by the show's protagonist every single episode, to a family and a fandom that had been trained to laugh instead of listen. Rick told you what was wrong with him. He told you in the show's most repeated line. And in 11 years, 7 seasons, and a merchandising empire built on that catchphrase, almost nobody heard the sentence underneath the joke. Rick and Morty is one of the most philosophically ambitious animated shows of its generation. That's not in dispute. Dan Harmon's writing weaves quantum mechanics, ethics, family dysfunction, and cosmic absurdity into episodes that regularly outperform prestige live-action television in narrative ambition. The world building is one of the richest in the medium. The show's better episodes are structurally denser than most feature films. None of that is being questioned here. But Rick Sanchez was carrying something underneath the brilliance. Something Harmon kept planting in every catchphrase, in every escape into another dimension, in every moment where Rick chose the portal gun over the person in front of him. And the terrifying thing isn't that Rick was right about the multiverse. The terrifying thing is that the show has spent 7 seasons documenting what happens when someone is right about the multiverse and treats being right as a substitute for being present. Over the next few minutes, you're going to see how every catchphrase, every adventure, every trip through interdimensional cable was Rick asking for help in a language nobody bothered to learn, and how a fandom that turned him into a lifestyle brand took the exact wrong lesson from a character the show was trying to warn them about. Here is what Rick was right about, full stop, uncontested. The multiverse, as depicted in the show, is real. Infinite realities exist. In some of them, nothing you do matters. In most of them, you're already dead. In statistical terms, no individual choice in any one timeline carries any weight against the backdrop of the whole. Rick did the math. Rick is correct. If you accept the show's cosmology, and you should because the show has never contradicted itself on this, Rick's diagnosis of reality is airtight. Nothing you do here in Dimension C-137 changes anything in the trillions of realities where you didn't do it, where you did the opposite, where you died as a baby, where you never existed at all. That's not nihilism. That's arithmetic. And Rick is the only character in the show doing the arithmetic honestly. What Rick was wrong about is what that arithmetic means for how you should live. And that's the argument the show has been making, quietly, patiently, in episode after episode, for a decade. To understand what Rick is, you have to understand what the show slowly reveals him to have lost. The lore comes out in fragments across seasons. Rick had a wife named Diane. He had a daughter, Beth, who he loved. And somewhere in the timeline of Rick's origin, both of them were killed, and Rick, using his portal gun, spent years jumping across realities hunting the version of himself he blamed for it. That's the origin. That's the load-bearing trauma the whole character is built on. The Rick we watch every episode is a widower and a grieving father who responded to catastrophic personal loss by weaponizing the infinite. He looked at the multiverse and did the only thing that made intellectual sense for a man who had lost the only 2 people who ever mattered to him. He decided nothing mattered. It was easier to believe that than to stay in the specific room where the specific bodies had specifically been. The Rick who eventually shows up in his daughter's garage decades later isn't a scientist. He's a survivor who never grieved. The multiverse isn't a discovery, it's a coping mechanism. Compare Rick to Morty. This is the comparison the show is built on, and the one most viewers miss. Morty exists, in the internal logic of the show, as camouflage. Rick's genius creates a brainwave signature so distinctive that any interdimensional authority tracking him can pinpoint him instantly. Morty's low-frequency brainwaves dampen the signal. That's the reason Rick keeps Morty close. It's a bombshell dropped at the end of the very first season. Rick chose his grandson not because he loves him, but because Morty makes Rick harder to detect. Sit with that. The relationship the entire show is built on begins as protective coloration. And every episode after that reveal is Rick discovering, against his own intent, that the tool he chose for camouflage is a grandchild with a soul, whose suffering starts to matter to him, whose presence starts to require actual love, instead of tactical proximity. Morty is Rick's punishment. Morty is Rick's second chance. Morty is what happens when a man who has done the math of the multiverse gets forced back into the specific room with a specific person who needs him. And every time it happens, Rick reaches for the portal gun instead of the person. Watch Rick Potion number 9, Season 1, Episode 6. Rick creates a love potion that goes wrong, transforms the entire population of Earth into monstrous creatures called Cronenbergs, and instead of fixing it, he portals himself and Morty to a nearly identical reality, where the Rick and Morty of that timeline happen to die at the exact right moment. They bury their own bodies in the backyard and take over the dead family's lives. Morty has to sit at dinner with a mother and father who are not his mother and father. The episode ends on Morty's face, staring at nothing, having just committed the most spiritually violent act imaginable to a child. Rick doesn't apologize. Rick doesn't reflect. Rick has already moved on because in his framework, that other Morty is just as real as this Morty, that other Beth is just as real, so nothing was lost. The math works. The grandson who has to eat dinner with his replacement parents is the one who has to live with what the math costs. Watch Autoerotic Assimilation. Season 2, Episode 3. Rick reconnects with an old lover named Unity, a hive mind that controls entire planets by fusing consciousness. For a brief window, Rick is happy. He isn't running, he isn't performing. He has found a partner who matches his scale. And then Unity leaves him, because being with Rick makes Unity worse. The episode ends with Rick pulling the trigger on a laser that only misses his skull because he passes out from the chemical he drank a split second before it fires. That is the Season 2 moment. That is the show telling you exactly what Rick's intellect protects him from and what happens the second the protection fails. The multiverse arithmetic did not save him from that room. Nothing saves anyone from that room. Watch The Wedding Squanchers. Season 2 finale. Rick's family is on the run from the Galactic Federation because of Rick. And in the closing minutes, Rick, the man who claims nothing matters, that family is a hallucination, that love is a chemistry problem, turns himself in to the Federation so his family can go home. He tells the truth about himself in a voiceover monologue that nobody in the family will ever hear. It is not the speech of a man who believes nothing matters. It is the speech of a man who has spent his whole life pretending nothing matters because caring nearly killed him once already. That is the entire show in 90 seconds. Watch The ABCs of Beth, Season 3, Episode 9. Beth, Rick's daughter, is asking the question she has spent her entire life not asking. Am I real? Am I the original? Or did you replace me with a clone at some point and never tell me? Rick has the technology to answer. He built it. Instead of answering, he offers her a different deal. He can make her a clone right now. She can leave, go anywhere in the multiverse, live any life she wants. The clone will stay behind and be a mother to her children and a daughter to him, and nobody will ever know. And Beth takes it, or she doesn't take it. And Rick deliberately blinded himself to the truth because he was too cowardly to face his daughter's choice. Watch The ABCs of Beth. When Beth asks if she is a clone, Rick avoids the emotional weight of her choice by cloning her anyway, deliberately shuffling the labels and erasing his own memory so that even he doesn't know who the real daughter is. He can map the quantum coordinates of infinite universes. He deliberately closes the loop by refusing to close it. That is the cleanest single beat of the whole show. Rick can solve the multiverse, but he cannot answer his daughter's most basic question, which is, do you see me? He chooses ambiguity because the truth would require him to actually parent someone. And Beth, the daughter he claims not to care about, spends the rest of the series carrying the not knowing. That is what being loved by Rick Sanchez costs. Not death, not exile. The permanent inability to know if you were ever chosen. Let's talk about how the world received Rick Sanchez. Rick and Morty was universally praised. Critics called it the smartest animated show on television. Every retrospective used the same phrases. Philosophically ambitious. Rare adult intelligence in animation. And the dominant cultural read on Rick himself, the one that got printed on t-shirts and quoted in Twitter bios and repeated back to each other in fandom spaces for a decade, was this. Rick is the coolest man alive. Rick is the Sigma grindset patron saint. Rick figured it out. Rick doesn't care because there's nothing worth caring about. That reading calcified in the early seasons and never fully corrected, no matter how many episodes the show devoted to showing you exactly the opposite. The fandom stormed a McDonald's over a dipping sauce because Rick mentioned it in one episode. The fandom generated the "you have to have a very high IQ to understand Rick and Morty" copy pasta and used it sincerely. The fandom took the character the show was diagnosing and treated him as an aspiration. Because the alternative was admitting that the show had been telling them, for years, that the man they were quoting was the sickest character in the room, and the joke was on anyone who wanted to be him. Strip all of it away. Strip the portal gun. Strip the alien planets. Strip the wubba lubba dub dub. Just take the argument the show has been making the whole time. Intelligence without emotional courage is a prison. Being right about the meaninglessness of the multiverse does not excuse you from the labor of being present with the people who love you. The math can be correct, and the response to the math can still ruin your life and everyone else's. Because there is another set of math running underneath the cosmology, and Rick is bad at that one. The math of a daughter who spent her childhood watching her father calculate distances from her, the math of a grandson being used as a signature dampener, the math of a wife whose murder he has never actually grieved because grief would require standing still. Rick is the smartest man in the universe on one axis and functionally illiterate on the other, and the show has never once let him win on the axis that matters. Rick has been failing that choice for 7 seasons. Rick Sanchez was right about the multiverse. That is the whole trap. He was right that nothing matters at the cosmic scale. He was right that infinite realities dilute individual meaning to zero. And he used that rightness as a wall to hide behind while his family starved for him. Being right was the psychological fortress. It was easier to be the smartest man in the universe than the father in the room. Easier to portal away than to stay and answer the question his daughter has been asking him for 3 decades, which is, do you actually love me, or am I an inconvenient side effect of your grief? The show has been asking Rick that question in 100 different disguises for a decade. And every episode, in every reality, Rick reaches for the portal gun instead of the answer. He was right. Nobody argued that. Being right just was not enough. Rick told you what was wrong with him in the first season. He wrote it into his catchphrase. He said it in every episode after. I am in great pain. Please help me. He has been asking, in the show's most repeated line, in the phrase people put on their bodies as tattoos, for 11 years. Name one character on the show who heard the sentence underneath the catchphrase. Name one fan who put those words on a t-shirt instead of the nonsense. Name one moment in 7 seasons where the smartest man in the universe was allowed, by anyone, to be a person who was in pain. I'll wait.